morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Romano mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floors. It was the kind of house that appeared in architecture magazines, all clean lines, expensive furniture, and carefully curated art pieces. Yet, despite its beauty, there was something cold about it. Perhaps it was the lack of family photographs on the walls, or the way every surface gleamed with such perfection that it felt untouched by human hands. It was a house, certainly, but it had never quite become a home. 6-year-old Luca Romano sat at the massive dining table, his small frame almost comical against the oversized leather chair. His feet didn't reach the floor, dangling several inches above the Persian rug beneath. Before him sat a plate of perfectly prepared breakfast: scrambled eggs, turkey bacon, wheat toast cut into triangles. He stared at it without interest, his dark eyes distant, as if looking at something far beyond the walls of this room. "Luca, sweetheart, you need to eat something." Maria's gentle voice broke the silence. She was a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back into a neat bun. She'd been with the Romano family for 8 years, hired when Luca's mother was still alive. Now she was the closest thing to maternal warmth the boy had in his life. Luca didn't respond. He never did. Maria placed a glass of orange juice beside his plate, her hand briefly touching his shoulder. "Your father will be down soon. He has a big day planned." Still nothing. Not even a flicker of acknowledgement in those intelligent, observant eyes. She sighed softly, not with frustration but with deep sadness. 2 years ago, before his mother passed away from a sudden illness, Luca had been a different child. Quieter than most his age, yes, but he'd spoken, he'd laughed, he'd asked questions about everything: why the sky was blue, where birds went at night, how cars worked. His mother, Catherine, had delighted in his curiosity, spending hours answering his endless inquiries. Then she was gone, and something in Luca had closed off completely. For the first few months, Vincent had brought in specialists, child psychologists, therapists, even a specialist from Johns Hopkins who dealt with childhood trauma. They'd all said variations of the same thing. Luca was processing grief in his own way. He would speak again when he was ready. There was no medical reason for his silence. It was emotional, psychological. He needed time, patience, and most importantly, he needed to feel safe enough to open up again. But time had passed, over a year now, and Luca remained locked in his silent world. The sound of footsteps on the marble staircase announced Vincent Romano's arrival. He entered the dining room with the kind of presence that commanded attention without requiring words. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair starting to show distinguished threads of gray at the temples, Vincent wore his authority like a second skin. Even in casual morning attire, dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, he exuded power. "Good morning, son," Vincent said, his voice measured and controlled. He took his seat at the head of the table, immediately reaching for the coffee Maria had prepared. "Did you sleep well?" Luca's eyes shifted toward his father, but he offered no response. No nod, no shake of the head, just that same distant stare. Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. To anyone who didn't know him well, he appeared completely calm. But Maria, who'd observed their interactions countless times, could see the frustration simmering beneath the surface. Not anger. Vincent never raised his voice to his son, but a deep, helpless frustration born from not knowing how to reach the only person in the world who truly mattered to him. "We have plans today," Vincent continued, unfolding his napkin with precise movements. "I thought we'd go out, get some breakfast at a place I used to visit when I was younger. Would you like that?" "Nothing. They make excellent pancakes. Chocolate chip, if I remember correctly." The barest flicker of interest might have crossed Luca's face, or perhaps it was just the morning light shifting across his features. Vincent chose to interpret it as encouragement. "It's settled then. We'll leave after you finish your breakfast." He glanced at Luca's untouched plate. "Eat, Luca. You're already too thin." Maria moved quietly around the room, refilling coffee, adjusting curtains, staying busy but always keeping one eye on the boy. She'd developed a sixth sense for his needs over the years. The way he'd push food around his plate when he was feeling particularly disconnected. How he'd gravitate toward windows when he needed to feel less trapped. The slight tension in his shoulders when he was overwhelmed. Right now, he was doing that thing where he seemed to shrink into himself, becoming as small and unnoticeable as possible. "Mr. Romano," Maria ventured carefully, "perhaps Luca would prefer his regular routine today. Tuesday is usually when Dr. Peterson comes for his tutoring session." "I've already rescheduled Dr. Peterson," Vincent replied. his tone brooking no argument. "Luca needs to experience life outside these walls. The therapists have said as much." "Of course," Maria conceded, though worry creased her brow. "I'll make sure he's dressed appropriately." Vincent nodded, returning his attention to his son. He watched Luca pick up a fork and slowly begin to eat, mechanical movements devoid of any real engagement. It broke something in Vincent every time he witnessed it, this shell of a child who should be running, playing, filling the house with noise and life and mess. After Catherine died, Vincent had thrown himself into work. It was easier to manage business portfolios and complicated negotiations than to face the grief in his son's eyes. Easier to build empires than to figure out how to rebuild a broken little boy. He knew this about himself. He wasn't proud of it, but he also didn't know how to be different. Emotional vulnerability had never been part of his vocabulary. His own father had raised him with a firm hand and minimal affection. "Men don't cry," his father used to say. "Men solve problems." And Vincent had internalized that lesson so thoroughly that when faced with a problem that couldn't be solved through strategy or resources, he found himself completely at a loss. "I have a meeting at 10, Vincent said, checking his watch. A vintage Rolex that had belonged to his grandfather. "We'll leave at 10:30. Make sure Tony has the car ready." "Yes, Mr. Romano." As Maria left to make the arrangements, Vincent and Luca sat in silence. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking time in a house where time often felt suspended. Vincent occasionally glanced at his son, searching for some opening, some way to bridge the vast distance between them. But Luca remained unreachable, locked behind walls that Vincent didn't know how to scale. Finally, Luca set down his fork. He'd eaten perhaps a third of his breakfast. It was more than usual, at least. "Go get ready," Vincent said quietly. "Wear something comfortable." Luca slipped from his chair and walked toward the stairs, his footsteps silent on the marble. He moved like a ghost through his own home, barely leaving an impression on the space around him. Upstairs in his bedroom, Luca stood in front of his closet while Maria selected clothes for him. His room was exactly what one might expect for a wealthy 6-year-old, filled with every toy and game imaginable. A custom-built bookshelf housing hundreds of children's books, a window seat overlooking the expansive grounds, yet it had the same untouched quality as the rest of the house. The toys remained in their original packaging. The books stood in perfect rows, spines uncracked. It was a room designed for a child but inhabited by someone who'd forgotten how to be one. How about this? Maria held up a navy blue sweater and khaki pants. "It's chilly today. Autumn's really settling in." Luca allowed her to dress him, passive and compliant. This was their routine. He no longer dressed himself, though he was certainly capable of it. It was as if he'd decided that engaging with even the smallest daily tasks required more energy than he possessed. Maria worked gently, narrating her actions as she always did. "Arms up, sweetie. There we go. Your father seems excited about this outing. He doesn't often take time away from work, you know. This is special." She knelt down to tie his shoes, taking the opportunity to look up at his face. "Luca, I know the world feels very big and scary sometimes. I know you miss your mama. We all do." Her voice grew thick with emotion. "But you're not alone, sweetheart. We're all here. Your papa, he may not always know the right words, but he loves you so much. You know that, don't you?" For just a moment, Luca's eyes met hers. In that brief connection, Maria saw such depth of pain and confusion that it nearly broke her heart. Then he looked away again, and the moment was gone. "Come on," she said, standing and offering her hand. "Let's not keep him waiting." The garage housed 5 vehicles, each more expensive than the last. For today's outing, Tony had prepared the black Escalade, large, comfortable, and equipped with tinted windows that provided privacy. Tony himself was a man in his early 40s, built like someone who'd spent considerable time in a gym, with a kind face that contradicted his imposing physique. He'd been Vincent's head of security for 6 years and had watched Luca grow up. The boy's silence bothered him more than he'd ever admit. "All set, boss," Tony said as Vincent and Luca emerged from the house. "Rosie's Diner, right?" "That's correct." Tony opened the rear door, and Vincent guided Luca inside with a gentle hand on his back. The boy climbed into his car seat without protest, another passive acceptance of whatever was decided for him. As Vincent settled into the seat beside his son, Tony caught his eye through the rearview mirror. "Good idea, this. Getting him out." Vincent didn't respond, but he appreciated Tony's support. His security team had been with him long enough to become something more than employees. They were confidants, in their own way, loyal not just to Vincent, but to the family itself. The drive from the Romano estate in one of New Jersey's most exclusive gated communities to the working-class neighborhood where Rosie's Diner was located took about 30 minutes. As they traveled, the scenery changed dramatically. Mansions and manicured lawns gave way to modest homes with chain-link fences. Luxury cars disappeared, replaced by older models with the occasional dent or rust spot. This was the real world, the one Luca had been sheltered from his entire life. Vincent watched his son's face as they drove. Luca was pressed against the window, those dark eyes taking in everything. Children playing basketball in a driveway, a woman pushing a stroller, an elderly man watering his small patch of garden. Ordinary scenes of ordinary life. I grew up not far from here, Vincent said suddenly, surprising himself. He rarely spoke about his past. In a neighborhood just like this one. Small house, 3 bedrooms for 7 people. We didn't have much, but your grandmother, my mother, she made it feel like we had everything. Luca didn't turn from the window, but Vincent sensed he was listening. Rosie's Diner was where my father would take us on Sunday mornings after church. All of us piled into a booth meant for 4. The owner, Rosie herself, she'd always slip us extra whipped cream on our pancakes when my father wasn't looking. Vincent smiled at the memory. I haven't been back in probably 25 years. I'm curious to see if it's changed. The truth was more complicated than nostalgia. Vincent had chosen this particular location deliberately. It was public, but not too public. Familiar territory from his youth, before his life had become complicated. And perhaps most importantly, it was far enough from his usual circles that they were unlikely to encounter anyone from his current world. He needed Luca to experience normalcy, and he needed to do it in a place where he could let his guard down, at least a little. They pulled up to Rosie's Diner at 11:15 a.m. The building was exactly as Vincent remembered, a classic chrome and red vinyl establishment that looked like it had been transplanted from the 1950s. A neon sign announced Rosie's in cheerful cursive. Through the large windows, Vincent could see red leather booths and a long counter with chrome stools. A bell above the door would jingle when they entered. It was, in every way, exactly the kind of unpretentious American diner that had once been on every corner. "Wait here a moment," Tony said, stepping out first. His eyes scanned the street, the parking lot, the diner itself. Old habits died hard. Even in a place like this, security protocols had to be followed. Vincent noticed Luca watching Tony's assessment with those observant eyes. The boy might not speak, but he missed nothing. He understood, perhaps more than Vincent gave him credit for, that their life was different from others, that normal families didn't have security details, that other children didn't live in guarded mansions. "All clear," Tony reported. "Want me to come in?" "No. Wait out here. I want this to feel as normal as possible." Tony nodded, understanding immediately. He'd take a position where he could see the entrance but wouldn't be obviously hovering. Vincent unbuckled Luca's car seat. "Ready?" Luca slid out of the vehicle, his small hand automatically reaching for his father's. It was one of the few physical connections he still maintained, this need to hold someone's hand in unfamiliar places. Vincent's fingers closed around his son's, and for a moment he allowed himself to feel the weight of that trust. Despite everything, the distance, the silence, Vincent's own emotional inadequacies, Luca still reached for him when he felt uncertain. They walked toward the diner entrance together, and Vincent found himself hoping, praying even, that this gamble would pay off, that somehow, exposure to a different environment, to people living their lives without the weight and complications of his world, might help his son find his way back. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as they stepped inside, and Vincent held his breath, wondering what would happen next in this carefully orchestrated attempt to reconnect with the one person he'd already lost once and couldn't bear to lose again. The interior of Rosie's Diner was a perfect time capsule. Black and white checkered floor tiles, red vinyl booths with chrome trim, vintage Coca-Cola advertisements on the walls. A jukebox in the corner played something from the Eagles. The air smelled like coffee, bacon grease, and maple syrup, the universal scent of American breakfast places. It was moderately busy for late morning. A few construction workers occupied the counter, their work boots dusty, and their conversations punctuated by easy laughter. An elderly couple shared a booth by the window, the comfortable silence between them speaking to decades of companionship. A young mother tried to convince her toddler to eat his fruit instead of throwing it on the floor. Normal life, real life. the kind Luca had never experienced. "Sit anywhere you like," called a voice from behind the counter. Vincent guided Luca toward a booth near the back, force of habit, always maintaining sight lines to exits, and helped him climb onto the vinyl seat. Luca immediately turned to look out the window. From here he could see the street, watch cars pass by, observe people walking their dogs or pushing shopping carts. His fascination with ordinary life was one of the few things that seemed to capture his attention anymore. Vincent picked up the laminated menu, though he already knew what he'd order. Some things, he suspected, never changed in places like this. "Hi there. Welcome to Rosie's." Vincent looked up, and for a brief moment time seemed to pause in that peculiar way it does when life is about to shift direction. The waitress who'd approached their table was smiling, genuinely smiling, not the practiced expression of professional courtesy, but the real thing. She was maybe in her late 20s, with light brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, minimal makeup, and eyes that held both warmth and weariness in equal measure. Her name tag read, "Emily." "I'm Emily. I'll be taking care of you both today," she said, pulling out her order pad. Then her attention shifted to Luca, and her smile somehow grew even brighter. "Well, hey there, handsome. What's your name?" Luca didn't respond, of course. He barely glanced at her before returning his gaze to the window. Emily didn't miss a beat, showing no sign of awkwardness or offense. "The strong, silent type, huh? I can respect that. Some of the best people I know are great listeners." She winked at Vincent. "What can I get you folks?" Vincent found himself slightly off balance. He'd expected, what? Discomfort when Luca didn't respond? Pity? But Emily had simply accepted his silence and moved on as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Coffee, please. Black. And," he glanced at his son, "what do you recommend for breakfast?" "Oh, you're at the right place. Rosie's has been making the best pancakes in Jersey since 1962. At least that's what the sign outside claims." Emily grinned. "Between you and me, they're pretty great. We've got regular blueberry, chocolate chip, or banana walnut." "Chocolate chip," Vincent said, watching Luca for any reaction. "And maybe some bacon on the side?" "Excellent choice. How do you like your pancakes, buddy?" Emily directed this at Luca, crouching slightly so she was at his eye level rather than towering over him. "Extra crispy? Soft and fluffy? Drowned in syrup or just a little bit?" Luca's eyes flickered toward her for just a second before returning to the window. "Tell you what," Emily said conspiratorially as if sharing a secret. "I'm going to bring you the fluffiest pancakes we've got with chocolate chips in every single bite, and I'll put the syrup on the side so you can decide exactly how much you want. Sound good?" She straightened up, made a note on her pad, and smiled at Vincent. "He looks like a smart kid. Bet he's got a lot going on in that head of his." "You have no idea," Vincent murmured. "Be right back with that coffee," Emily promised, and she was off, weaving between tables with practiced efficiency. Vincent watched her go, then turned his attention to Luca. "She seems nice." No response. "Different from home, isn't it? Being here, surrounded by people just living their lives." Silence. Vincent sighed quietly. He'd known this wouldn't be easy. What had he expected? That bringing Luca to a diner would suddenly crack through a year of silence? That exposure to normalcy would magically heal trauma and grief? Still, something about this place felt right. Maybe it was the memories of his own childhood. Maybe it was the genuine warmth in Emily's greeting. Or maybe he was just desperate enough to grasp at any possibility, no matter how slim. Emily returned quickly with his coffee and a glass of milk for Luca. "Food'll be up in just a few minutes. Jimmy's on the grill today and he's fast." She set the drinks down carefully. "You folks from around here?" "A long time ago," Vincent said. "I grew up nearby. Haven't been back to this area in years."
"Ah, a homecoming visit. That's sweet." Emily glanced around the diner fondly. "This place has been here forever. Rosie's daughter runs it now. Original Rosie passed about 10 years ago, but they've kept everything exactly the same. Some of our regulars have been coming here for 40, 50 years. Consistency is underrated," Vincent observed. "Right?" Emily beamed. "In a world that's always changing, there's something nice about having places that stay the same, like—"
"I don't know, anchors or something." She paused, then added, "Your little guy looks tired. Long morning?" Something like that. Emily studied Luca for a moment with an expression Vincent couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't pity. He'd seen enough of that from therapists and well-meaning acquaintances. It was more like recognition, as if she saw something familiar in his son's withdrawn demeanor. "Well, nothing a good breakfast can't help," she said finally. Be right back." As she walked away, Vincent found himself watching her interact with other customers. She had an ease about her, a natural friendliness that seemed completely unforced. The construction workers joked with her, and she gave as good as she got. The elderly couple's order apparently never changed because she simply called out, "The usual for Mr. and Mrs. Patterson," without asking. Even the frustrated young mother received a sympathetic smile and an offer to box up the toddler's fruit for later. And this was someone who knew how to connect with people, who made them feel seen and valued even in a brief interaction over breakfast orders. When Emily returned with their food, she did something unexpected. Instead of simply setting the plates down and leaving, she pulled a wrapped crayon and a paper placemat from her apron pocket. "Almost forgot," she said, placing them in front of Luca. "We've got these for kids. The placemat has games on the back, mazes and connect the dots and stuff, in case you get bored waiting for grown-ups to finish their coffee." She unwrapped the crayon for him, green as it happened, and pointed to the blank space on the placemat. "Or you can just draw whatever you want. That's what I always liked best." Luca looked at the crayon, then at the placemat. His hand moved slowly, uncertainly, and picked up the crayon. It was the first voluntary action Vincent had seen from him all morning. Emily caught Vincent's eye and something passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that this small moment mattered. Then she straightened up, all business again. "All right, dig in before it gets cold. Holler if you need anything." Vincent cut into his pancakes, suddenly aware that for the first time in over a year, he was sharing a meal with his son outside their home. It was such a simple thing, something families did every day without thought, yet it felt monumental. Luca hadn't touched his food yet. He was staring at the crayon in his hand as if trying to remember what it was for. Vincent wanted to encourage him, to prompt him somehow, but something held him back. Push too hard, and Luca would shut down completely. That much he'd learned from the therapists. So he ate his breakfast and drank his coffee and simply sat with his son in comfortable silence, listening to the ambient sounds of the diner, dishes clattering, conversations murmuring, the jukebox transitioning from the Eagles to Tom Petty. After several long minutes, Luca set down the crayon and picked up his fork. He began to eat slowly and methodically, the way he did everything these days. But he was eating, and that was something. They were halfway through breakfast when Emily swung by to refill Vincent's coffee. "How's everything tasting?" "Excellent. You weren't exaggerating about the pancakes." "Told you." She glanced at Luca's plate, noting he'd eaten about half. "Good job, sweetheart. Those were some serious pancakes to tackle." She started to move on, then paused. "Hey, I have to tell you something funny that happened this morning. So there's this regular customer, Mr. Chen, comes in every Tuesday like clockwork. Orders the same thing, eggs over easy, wheat toast, coffee with exactly 2 sugars. Been doing it for probably 20 years. Emily's eyes sparkled with the setup. Vincent found himself leaning in slightly, curious despite himself. Even Luca seemed to be listening, though he kept his gaze fixed on his plate. "So this morning," Emily continued, "Mr. Chen comes in, sits at his usual spot, and I'm about to just put in his regular order when he stops me. Says he wants to try something different. After 20 years, everyone in the kitchen practically stopped what they were doing. Jimmy came out to see if Mr. Chen was feeling okay. "What did he order?" Vincent asked, playing along. "Pancakes, chocolate chip pancakes." Emily grinned. "Same as your son. And you know what he said? He said he'd been thinking about it for months but was too nervous to change his routine. Then he realized he's 78 years old, and if not now, when? So he ordered the pancakes, and you should have seen his face when he took the first bite. Pure joy, like he'd discovered treasure." Vincent smiled. A real smile, not the practiced expressions he used in business meetings. "Good for Mr. Chen, right? It reminded me that it's never too late to try something new, never too late to change, or grow, or surprise yourself." She said this lightly, but Vincent sensed layers of meaning beneath the simple story. Emily refilled his coffee and was about to leave when Luca did something completely unexpected. He picked up his napkin and carefully, deliberately, wiped his mouth. Then he looked directly at Emily, not past her, not through her, but at her, and the corners of his mouth lifted in the smallest suggestion of a smile. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. If Vincent had blinked, he would have missed it entirely. But he didn't blink, and he saw it, and his heart nearly stopped in his chest. Emily saw it too. Her expression softened with something that looked like understanding, and she gave Luca the tiniest nod, as if to say, "I see you." Then she moved on to her next table, leaving the moment unforced and unpressured. Vincent stared at his son, hardly daring to breathe. A smile, an actual smile. The first one he'd seen in so long he'd almost forgotten what it looked like. "Luca," he said softly. But the moment had passed. Luca was back to studying his plate. His face returned to its usual neutral expression. Yet something had shifted. Some infinitesimal crack had appeared in the walls surrounding his son. They finished their breakfast in silence. But it felt different now. Less heavy. As if possibility had entered the space and made itself comfortable. When Emily brought the check, she included a small container. Leftover pancakes boxed up, in case someone gets hungry later. She winked at Luca. Pancakes are always better the second time around. Scientific fact. Vincent left a tip that was probably 3 times the cost of the meal, but Emily didn't comment on it. She simply thanked them warmly, told them to come back any time, and moved on to clear their table. As they stood to leave, Vincent placed his hand on Luca's shoulder, guiding him toward the door. Luca moved compliantly, but just before they stepped outside, he turned his head to look back at Emily. She was wiping down their table, humming along to whatever song had started playing on the jukebox. She must have felt his gaze because she looked up and waved. "Bye, honey. See you soon." Luca's hand twitched, and for a second, Vincent thought he might wave back. But the moment passed and they stepped out into the cool autumn air, the bell above the door jingling their departure. In the car, heading back to the mansion, Vincent couldn't stop replaying those few seconds when Luca had smiled. It had been so brief, so subtle that anyone else might have dismissed it. But Vincent knew better. That smile was everything. "Boss," Tony said from the front seat, his eyes meeting Vincent's in the rearview mirror. "That went well?" "Yeah," Vincent said quietly, his gaze on Luca, who was once again pressed against the window, watching the world pass by. "Yeah, Tony. I think it did." He pulled out his phone and made a note in his calendar. Tuesday morning. Same time. He'd rescheduled Dr. Peterson before. He could do it again, because something had happened in that diner. Something small but significant. And Vincent Romano hadn't built an empire by ignoring opportunities when they presented themselves. If there was even the slightest chance that Emily the waitress, with her easy warmth and genuine kindness, could help his son find his way back to the world, then Vincent would make sure they returned to Rosie's diner, as many times as it took. 3 weeks had passed since that first visit to Rosie's diner, and it had become a ritual. Every Tuesday and Friday morning at precisely 11:15 a.m., the black Escalade would pull into the parking lot. Tony would scan the area with practiced efficiency, and Vincent Romano would guide his silent son through the jingling door into the warm, familiar chaos of breakfast service. Emily had come to expect them. She'd find herself glancing at the clock around 11:10, straightening her apron, making sure she had crayons and fresh placemats ready. The other waitresses had noticed. Of course they had. In a place like Rosie's, where most customers were regulars whose orders could be predicted down to the number of sugar packets they'd use, any newcomer stood out. And the Romano pair stood out more than most. "Your fancy family is here," Denise, the other morning waitress, would whisper with a knowing smile. Denise had been working at Rosie's for 15 years and had seen everything. She was in her early 40s with bottle blonde hair and a matter-of-fact attitude that customers either loved or found abrasive. There was no in-between. "They're not my anything," Emily would protest, but she couldn't quite hide her smile. "Girl, the way that man tips? He's everyone's something," Denise would laugh. "But seriously, that kid, there's a story there." There was indeed a story there. Emily could see it in the way Luca moved through the world, carefully as if he was afraid to take up too much space, in the way his father watched him with an expression that mixed love with helplessness, in the expensive clothes that didn't quite fit the casual diner setting, in the bodyguard who always waited outside but whose eyes never stopped scanning for threats. Emily had grown up around struggle, different from whatever the Romanos were dealing with, but struggle nonetheless. She recognized the signs of people carrying weight they couldn't put down. On this particular Friday morning, their 7th visit, Emily was ready with their usual table and a fresh pot of coffee before they even sat down. Luca was wearing a gray hoodie and jeans today, looking slightly more relaxed than in the button-down shirts he'd worn on earlier visits. "Morning, gentlemen," Emily greeted them with her customary warmth. "The usual?" Vincent nodded, settling into the booth. "Please. Though I think Luca might be ready to try the blueberry pancakes today. What do you think, son?" It was a question Vincent asked every visit now, never expecting an answer but always offering the choice. Emily had noticed this pattern, the careful way he tried to engage Luca without pressuring him. She respected that. "Blueberry pancakes coming right up," Emily said, jotting it down. "And I have something special today." She pulled out a small coloring book from her apron pocket. Nothing expensive, just one of those newsstand varieties with simple pictures. "Found this at the corner store yesterday. Thought you might like it better than the placemats. It's got animals and cars and stuff." She placed it on the table in front of Luca along with a small box of crayons. Not just one green crayon this time, but a whole set of 8 colors. No pressure to use it, just thought I'd offer. Luca's eyes fixed on the coloring book. His hand hovered over it, not quite touching, as if testing whether it was real. "That's very thoughtful," Vincent said quietly. "You didn't have to do that." Emily shrugged. "It was like $3. Besides, I remember being a kid stuck at restaurants while adults talked forever. Gets boring fast." She winked at Luca. "Though between you and me, I think the grown-up conversations are way more boring for them than for us." As she walked away to put in their order, Emily felt Vincent's eyes following her. It wasn't uncomfortable, not like some of the looks she got from certain customers, but it was assessing, as if he was trying to figure something out about her. In the kitchen, Jimmy was already working on their pancakes. He was a man in his 60s who'd been cooking at Rosie's for 30 years and took pride in knowing exactly how each regular liked their food prepared. "The quiet kid and his dad?" Jimmy asked, not looking up from the griddle. "Yep. He ever talk yet?" "No, but he's loosening up, I think. Little things." Emily pulled out glasses for their drinks. "He makes eye contact now. Sometimes his mouth does this thing like he's thinking about smiling." "You're good with him," Jimmy observed. "Got a gift for connecting with people, especially the tough cases." Emily didn't respond to that. The tough cases Jimmy referred to were part of why she'd ended up at Rosie's in the first place. After her plans for a teaching degree had derailed, student loans she couldn't afford, a grandmother who needed care, life happening the way it always seemed to, she'd found herself here. It wasn't what she'd imagined for herself, but it had its moments. Working with people, making them feel seen and valued even in brief interactions, gave her life meaning in a way that surprised her. Maybe it wasn't a classroom full of students, but it was connection nonetheless. When she brought their food out, she found Luca had opened the coloring book. He hadn't colored anything yet, but he was turning pages slowly, examining each picture with serious concentration. "Found one you like?" Emily asked, setting down their plates. Luca stopped on a page showing a lighthouse by the ocean. His finger traced the outline of the building, following the spiral of the light at the top. "Good choice," Emily said. "Lighthouses are cool. They help ships find their way home when it's dark and stormy." She paused, then added conversationally, "I saw a real lighthouse once when I was about your age. Went on a school trip to Cape May. It was so tall I got dizzy looking up at it." Vincent watched this interaction with rapt attention. Emily had a way of talking to Luca that was neither condescending nor overly careful. She spoke to him like a person, not a fragile thing that might break. "You like the ocean?" Vincent asked Emily. "Love it, though I don't get there as often as I'd like." Emily smiled ruefully. "Turns out working 2 jobs doesn't leave a lot of time for beach trips." "2 jobs? Rosie's in the mornings, and I do evening shifts at a bookstore downtown 3 days a week." Emily said it matter-of-factly without complaint. "Keeps me busy." "That's a lot," Vincent observed. "It's life." Emily shrugged. "We all do what we need to do, right? Anyway, enjoy your breakfast. Holler if you need anything." As she moved away, Vincent found himself troubled by something in that brief exchange. 2 jobs. Student loans, from what she'd mentioned once before. A grandmother who needed care. He'd overheard her discussing medical appointments with Denise last week. Emily's warmth and generosity with Luca suddenly took on new dimensions when he considered that she was likely struggling herself. He made a mental note. There might be ways to help without being obvious about it. Vincent Romano was many things, but he believed in reciprocity. If someone did something valuable for him, and helping his son was invaluable, they should be compensated fairly. Luca had picked up a blue crayon and was carefully coloring the ocean around the lighthouse. His movements were slow and deliberate, staying mostly within the lines. It was the most engaged Vincent had seen him in months. "That's looking good," Vincent said softly. "The ocean's a nice shade of blue." Luca didn't respond, but he didn't stop coloring either. For now, that was enough. By their 10th visit, patterns had solidified into routine. Vincent and Luca always took the same booth. Emily always served them, even when it meant trading tables with Denise. Luca always ordered chocolate chip pancakes except for that one time with the blueberry, which he'd eaten half of before returning to his preferred choice the next visit. But something was different today. Emily noticed it the moment they walked in. Luca was holding his father's hand tighter than usual, his shoulders hunched up near his ears, a sign of stress she'd learned to recognize. "Morning," she greeted them, keeping her tone light. "Rough start to the day?" "Something like that," Vincent admitted. "We had to stop by the doctor's office for a checkup. Luca's not fond of medical settings. Can't blame him there. I once hid in a supply closet to avoid getting a shot when I was 7. Emily smiled at Luca. "The nurse found me anyway. Turns out they're really good at seeking out scared kids." She brought them their drinks and gave Luca some extra time before taking their order. Sure enough, after a few minutes of sitting in the familiar booth with the familiar smells and sounds around him, his shoulders began to relax. "Better?" Emily asked when she returned. Vincent nodded gratefully. "Much." It struck Emily then, watching Vincent's obvious relief, how much pressure this man carried. He was clearly wealthy. The clothes, the car, the security detail made that obvious. But wealth didn't insulate anyone from worry, especially not when it came to children. "The usual?" she asked. "Please." As she turned to go, Luca did something unprecedented. He reached out and tugged gently on her apron. Emily froze. Vincent froze. Even the ambient noise of the diner seemed to pause. She turned back slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Yeah, honey. What's up?" Luca was holding up the coloring book, the same one she'd given him weeks ago. He'd colored dozens of pages since then, bringing it with him on every visit. He opened it to a page he'd finished the previous visit, a picture of a dog playing in a park. "That's beautiful," Emily said, genuinely impressed. "You colored the grass so carefully, and look at all those different colors in the dog's fur. Is that your favorite page?" Luca nodded, an actual, deliberate nod, his first clear response to a direct question since they'd met. Emily felt her eyes prickle with unexpected emotion. "I'm so glad you showed me. That's really special." She paused, then asked carefully, "Would you like me to hang it up here? We have a wall in the back where we put up art. Lots of kids draw pictures for us." Another nod. "Then I'd be honored to display it. Let me just—" She gently took the book from him, carefully tore out the page along the perforation and held it up to show Vincent. "With your permission?" Vincent's voice was thick when he answered. "Of course." Emily excused herself and headed to the kitchen, ostensibly to put in their order, but really to give herself a moment to process what had just happened. In the back hallway, away from customers, she pressed the picture to her chest and took a deep breath. Denise found her there. "You okay?" "Yeah, The kid, he communicated, reached out to me, nodded at questions. It's the first time." "That's great, Em." "It is. It really is." Emily looked at the picture in her hands. "There's something about him, Denise. Something that just breaks my heart and fills it up at the same time." Denise studied her friend carefully. "You're getting attached. I know. I can't help it. Just be careful, okay? That family, whoever they are, they're not from our world. You can see it in everything about them." "I know," Emily repeated. But knowing and caring were two different things. She found some tape and hung Luca's picture on the wall near the kitchen, a place of honor among the dozens of children's drawings that decorated Rosie's. When she brought their food out, she made sure Luca could see where she'd placed it. "Right there, see? Next to the picture of the rainbow. Now everyone who comes to Rosie's gets to see your beautiful art." The smile that crossed Luca's face then was small and fleeting, but it was unmistakable. Not just a twitch at the corner of his mouth, but a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. Vincent made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and quickly covered it by reaching for his coffee. Emily pretended not to notice, giving them privacy in the moment, but her heart felt too big for her chest. After that breakthrough, things progressed quickly. On their next visit, Luca pointed at menu items instead of having his father order for him. The visit after that, he made eye contact with Emily for several seconds when she asked if he wanted whipped cream on his pancakes. And 2 weeks after the coloring book incident, something extraordinary happened. It was a Tuesday morning, unseasonably warm for November. The diner was busier than usual. Some kind of road construction had detoured extra traffic through the neighborhood. Emily was juggling more tables than normal, moving at double speed to keep up. She was carrying a tray of drinks when it happened. One of the construction workers, gesturing animatedly while telling a story, knocked into her as she passed. The tray tilted dangerously. Emily managed to save most of it, but one glass, a full orange juice, tipped over and splashed directly down her front. The cold liquid soaked through her uniform immediately. Emily gasped at the shock of it, looking down at the spreading orange stain across her white shirt and apron. "Oh man, I'm so sorry." The construction worker jumped up, genuinely apologetic. "It's okay, accidents happen," Emily assured him, though inwardly she was calculating whether she had time to go home and change before her evening shift. This was her only work uniform currently clean. The other was in the wash. She set down the tray and was dabbing uselessly at the stain with a napkin when she heard it. A sound she'd never heard before. A sound that made the entire diner fall silent. Laughter. Pure, genuine, childish laughter. The kind that erupts from deep in the belly and can't be contained. Emily looked up to find Luca with his hand over his mouth, his eyes dancing with mirth, his shoulders shaking with giggles he couldn't quite suppress. He was laughing at her, at the absurdity of the juice spill, at her shocked expression, at the way she was standing there dripping orange liquid onto the checkered floor. And it was the most beautiful sound Emily had ever heard. Vincent had gone completely still, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his mouth. His eyes were wide, shining with tears he didn't bother to hide. Around them, other customers were starting to smile, not entirely sure what was happening but sensing its importance. Emily felt her own eyes fill with tears. She didn't know why Luca's laughter was so significant, didn't know the full story of his silence, but she understood instinctively that she was witnessing something miraculous. "You think that's funny, huh?" she said, her voice warm with affection. "Me standing here looking like I lost a fight with a juice box?" Luca nodded, still giggling, and then, in a voice that was rusty from disuse, barely more than a whisper, he spoke his first word in over a year. "Funny." The single word hung in the air like a bell chime. Vincent's coffee cup clattered against the saucer as he set it down with shaking hands. Emily pressed her hand to her mouth, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "Yeah," she managed to say. "Yeah, honey, it is pretty funny." She wanted to say more, wanted to acknowledge the enormity of what had just happened, but some instinct told her to keep it light, to not make such a big deal of it that Luca felt pressured or scared back into silence. So she simply smiled at him, orange juice still dripping from her apron, and said, "Tell you what, since you think this is so hilarious, you get extra whipped cream on your pancakes today. Deal?" Luca smiled, that full, transformative smile, and nodded. "Deal," he whispered. Emily excused herself to the back to change into her spare shirt. Thankfully, Denise kept extras for emergencies. In the staff bathroom, she leaned against the sink and let herself cry. Big, messy tears of joy and release. When she returned to the dining room, Denise grabbed her arm. "What the hell just happened?" "He laughed, he spoke, he—" Emily shook her head, unable to fully articulate it. "That kid hasn't been talking?" "Not for a long time, I think. Not until just now." Denise whistled low. No wonder his dad looks like he just witnessed a resurrection. Indeed, Vincent appeared transformed. The careful control he usually maintained had cracked, revealing raw emotion underneath. When Emily brought their food, he reached out and gently caught her wrist. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "You have no idea what you've done for us." "I didn't do anything," Emily protested. I was just myself." "Exactly." Vincent held her gaze, and Emily saw depths there she hadn't noticed before. Grief and hope and something that looked like desperation. "Don't ever underestimate the value of that." He released her wrist and Emily moved on to her other tables. But she felt changed somehow. As if by witnessing Luca's breakthrough, she'd become part of something larger than herself. That afternoon, after their shift ended, Emily and Denise sat in a corner booth splitting a piece of pie. "So," Denise said carefully, "you going to tell me what's really going on with that family?" "I don't know what's going on," Emily admitted. "The dad's obviously wealthy. They have a bodyguard, though he tries to be subtle about it. The kid was in some kind of, I don't know, silent phase, and today he broke through it. You know they're not normal, right? Normal people don't travel with security details." "I know. And you're getting attached anyway." Emily sighed. "Yeah, I am. Is that stupid?" "Maybe a little," Denise said, but her tone was gentle. "Just protect yourself, Em. You've got a good heart, but good hearts can get broken real easy." "I know that too." Emily had learned that lesson several times over. Her father leaving when she was 12, her college dreams derailing, her grandmother's declining health. She knew about heartbreak, but she also knew about hope. And watching Luca laugh, hearing him speak, seeing the joy transform his father's face. That had been pure hope. Whatever complications came with the Romano family, Emily couldn't bring herself to regret the connection forming between them. That evening, Emily was shelving books at the Cornerstone bookshop where she worked her second job. It was quiet, just her and Mr. Patel, the owner, and one customer browsing the mystery section. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Vincent Romano. Maria gave me your number from the diner's staff contact list. I hope that's acceptable. I wanted to thank you again for today, and to ask if you might be available to meet for coffee sometime. Not at Rosie's, somewhere we could talk privately. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Emily stared at the message for a long moment. Everything in her life had taught her to be wary of wealthy men who wanted private conversations, but this didn't feel predatory. It felt important. She typed back, "Of course. When works for you?" The response came quickly. "Tomorrow? I know a place. 2 p.m. I'll be there." He sent an address to a coffee shop in a nicer part of town, the kind of place where lattes cost $8 and everyone worked on MacBooks. Emily looked down at her work clothes, jeans and a Cornerstone bookshop t-shirt, and wondered what Vincent Romano wanted to discuss that required privacy. Part of her knew she should be more cautious, should ask more questions, should maybe bring a friend. But another part of her, the part that had watched a silent boy find his voice, that had witnessed a father's desperate hope, told her to trust her instincts, and her instincts said that whatever was coming next, it was going to change everything. Vincent sat in his study late that night, a glass of scotch untouched on the desk beside him. Through the window, he could see the lights of the city in the distance, glittering like scattered diamonds. Down the hall, Luca was sleeping. Actually sleeping, not just lying awake staring at the ceiling the way he had been for months. Maria had reported that he'd talked to her before bed. Not much, just a few words about his day, but it was the most he'd said at home in over a year, all because of Emily. Vincent had spent his entire adult life building walls, around his business, around his family, around himself. He'd learned early that in his world, vulnerability was dangerous, that caring about people made them targets, that the safest way to protect those you loved was to keep them at a distance. But Luca couldn't live at a distance anymore. His son needed connection, needed humanity, needed people like Emily, who saw him as a child rather than a problem to be solved. The question now was how to navigate what came next, because Vincent knew something that Emily didn't. In his world, there were people watching, always watching, and they'd noticed the diner visits, had noticed how Vincent's son had connected with a waitress. In business, every weakness could be exploited, every attachment used as leverage. He pulled up Emily's social media profiles on his laptop, not stalking, just due diligence. She had a modest Facebook presence, mostly pictures with her grandmother and posts about books. No indication she had any idea who Vincent really was or what getting involved with his family might mean. He needed to tell her. Not everything, that would be too dangerous, but enough that she could make an informed choice about whether to continue having contact with Luca. Because if she chose to walk away, Vincent would let her. It would break his son's heart, would probably set back his progress significantly, but he would let her go rather than trap her in a situation she hadn't chosen. That's what the coffee meeting was really about. Giving Emily the truth, or at least a version of it, and letting her decide. Vincent finished the scotch and headed upstairs to check on Luca one more time. His son was curled on his side, clutching the coloring book Emily had given him. His face in sleep looked peaceful, younger, more like the child he should have been allowed to be. "I'm going to protect you," Vincent whispered, though Luca couldn't hear. "Both of you. I promise." How he was going to keep that promise, he wasn't entirely sure yet. But Vincent Romano had built an empire on impossible promises. He could figure this out too. He had to. The coffee shop Vincent had chosen was everything Emily expected. Exposed brick walls, minimalist decor, baristas who treated coffee making like performance art. She arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a regular coffee that cost more than her lunch usually did, and claimed a table in the corner. When Vincent walked in at exactly 2 p.m., he looked different outside the casual context of the diner, more formal in his tailored suit, more imposing. The other customers glanced up, sensing the shift in the room's energy that people like Vincent carried with them. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "I know this might seem strange." "A little," Emily admitted. "But after yesterday, I figure strange is relative." Vincent smiled slightly. Fair point. He ordered an espresso from the hovering barista, then turned his full attention to Emily. I want to be honest with you about my situation. About Luca's situation? Emily wrapped her hands around her coffee cup listening. My wife, Luca's mother, passed away 2 years ago. It was sudden, an illness that progressed too quickly for treatment. Vincent's voice remained steady, but Emily could hear the grief beneath it. Luca stopped speaking about 6 months after she died. The doctors called it selective mutism triggered by trauma. We tried everything. Therapy, specialists, different approaches. Nothing worked until you. I'm so sorry, Emily said softly. That's devastating. What you've done for my son in these past weeks, there aren't words for it. Hearing him laugh yesterday, hearing him speak. Vincent paused, composing himself. You gave him back something I thought we'd lost forever. I didn't do anything special. I just treated him like a regular kid. That's exactly what made it special. Vincent leaned forward. Emily, I'd like to propose something. I want to hire you as Luca's tutor, someone who can spend structured time with him, help him continue this progress. I'll pay whatever rate you think is fair, significantly more than you're making at your current jobs. Emily blinked, processing. You want to hire me? I know it's sudden, but Luca has connected with you in a way he hasn't with anyone else. I think having you in his life regularly, in an official capacity, could help him heal. It was a generous offer, more than generous. Emily did quick mental math. If he was serious about paying well, she could quit one of her jobs, have more time with her grandmother, maybe finally chip away at her student loans. But something felt off. Not wrong, exactly, but incomplete. Can I ask you something? Emily said carefully. Who are you, Vincent? Really? Vincent had clearly expected this question. I'm a businessman. I handle investments, property acquisitions, consulting for various clients. It's complicated work that requires a lot of discretion. And the security? Tony, who's always watching the diner from outside? Comes with the territory, unfortunately. When you work with certain clients, certain amounts of money, you take precautions. Vincent held her gaze steadily. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand. Being part of Luca's life means being part of a world that's more complicated than what you're used to. I need to know you can handle that. Emily studied him, trying to read between the lines. There was truth in what he was saying, but also careful omissions. She'd grown up around people who worked hard to appear legitimate while operating in gray areas. She recognized the signs. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal or uncomfortable, Vincent continued. Just to spend time with Luca, teach him things, help him engage with the world again. Be the person who makes him feel safe enough to keep talking. Can I think about it? Of course, take all the time you need. They talked for another 20 minutes about logistics, about Luca's interests and challenges, about what a tutoring arrangement might look like. Vincent was professional, respectful, never pressuring. But Emily left the coffee shop feeling like she'd just been offered a door to a room she wasn't sure she wanted to enter. Over the next 2 weeks, Emily continued her regular routine at Rosie's. But the dynamic had shifted. Luca was talking now, not constantly, not in long conversations, but in small bursts. He'd tell her about books Maria read to him. He'd ask questions about her day. He'd say thank you when she brought his food. Each word felt like a gift. Vincent had given her space to consider his offer, not mentioning it during diner visits. But Emily could feel the question hanging between them. She wanted to say yes. The practical benefits were enormous. But Denise's warning kept echoing in her mind. They're not from our world. The decision was made for her on a Wednesday afternoon. Emily was leaving her grandmother's doctor's appointment, helping Nana into the car, when she noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The same black sedan she'd seen outside her apartment that morning, and outside the bookstore yesterday. Someone was following her. Her heart began to race. She helped her grandmother buckle in, keeping her movements calm despite the fear coursing through her. As she pulled away from the curb, the sedan followed at a discreet distance. Emily's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This had to be connected to Vincent, to whatever world he inhabited that required bodyguards and careful omissions. She drove to the police station and parked directly in front. The sedan drove past without slowing, but the message was clear. We know where you live, where you work, where your grandmother goes for treatment. That evening, Emily called Vincent. I need to know the truth, she said without preamble. All of it. Because someone's following me. And I don't think it's a coincidence. There was a long silence. Then Vincent said, Where are you? Home. I'm sending Tony to watch your building. Don't go anywhere alone tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. Vincent. I'm sorry, Emily. This is my fault. I'll explain everything, I promise. But right now I need to make sure you're safe. The call ended and Emily sat in her small apartment, curtains drawn, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The next morning, Tony was indeed parked outside her building. He walked her to Rosie's before her shift, his presence both comforting and terrifying. Vincent was waiting in their usual booth, but without Luca. His face was drawn, tired in a way she hadn't seen before. "Where's Luca?" Emily asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "With Maria. He's safe." Vincent signaled to Denise that they needed privacy. "Emily, I owe you the truth. My business dealings, they're legitimate, but they involve people who aren't always legitimate. I consult for families who operate in gray areas. Because of this, there are people who watch me who look for leverage. And I'm leverage now. You might be. I don't know yet." Vincent's honesty was almost brutal. "The people following you, they could be business associates gathering information, or they could be competitors looking for weaknesses. Either way, they've noticed our connection to you." Emily felt cold. "What does that mean for me? For my grandmother? It means I made a terrible mistake involving you without fully understanding the risks." Vincent's voice was heavy with guilt. "And now I need to fix it. I can offer you protection, Tony and others watching you, security measures, or I can disappear from your life completely. Make it clear you're not connected to us. Either way, the surveillance should stop. And Luca?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "He's already asking for you. He's regressed slightly since yesterday, quieter again. But I won't put you in danger for his sake. That's not a choice I'll make." Emily looked at this powerful man offering her an out, clearly hoping she wouldn't take it, and saw the impossible position he was in, caught between protecting his son and protecting her. "I need time," she said finally. "A few days to think, to make sure my grandmother is safe, to figure out what I can live with. Take all the time you need. Tony will remain assigned to you until we're certain the threat has passed, whether you choose to stay in our lives or not." Emily nodded and stood to start her shift, but at the booth's edge she paused. "Does Luca know why I haven't been coming by? I told him you were busy. He asked if he did something wrong." Vincent's voice cracked slightly. "I assured him he didn't." That broke Emily's heart more than anything else. The idea of Luca thinking he'd somehow caused her absence, retreating back into his shell because another person had disappeared from his life. She thought about it for 3 days, weighed the risks against the connection, considered her grandmother's safety against Luca's progress, analyzed every angle until her head hurt. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. On Saturday morning, Emily called Vincent. "I'll do it, the tutoring, but I have conditions. My grandmother's safety is non-negotiable. I need to know exactly what I'm walking into, and if at any point this becomes dangerous in a way I can't handle, I'm out. No guilt, no obligations. Agreed to all of it." The relief in Vincent's voice was palpable. "Thank you, Emily. Don't thank me yet. I might be making the biggest mistake of my life. Or," Vincent said quietly, "you might be saving my son's life. Time will tell." Emily hung up and looked at her grandmother, who'd been listening from her chair by the window. "You're sure about this, sweetheart?" Nana asked. "No, but I'm sure about that little boy who finally learned to laugh again, and sometimes that has to be enough." Emily's first official day as Luca's tutor began on a crisp Monday morning in early December. She arrived at the Romano mansion at 9 a.m., her bag packed with books, art supplies, and lesson plans she'd spent the weekend preparing. Maria greeted her at the door with a warm smile. "He's been awake since 6, she confided, leading Emily through marble hallways, too excited to sleep. The sunroom they'd converted into a teaching space was perfect. Large windows overlooking the grounds, kid-sized furniture, shelves waiting to be filled with books. Luca stood by the window in jeans and a blue sweater, and when he saw Emily, his whole face lit up. "Hi, Luca," Emily said, setting down her bag. "Ready to learn some stuff?" "Yes," he said clearly, and Emily felt that familiar flutter of joy at hearing his voice. She settled into a chair across from him. "Here's how this works. We'll do reading, math, science, art, lots of different things. Some days we'll talk a lot. Some days maybe not. Whatever feels right to you is fine. Deal?" "Deal," Luca whispered, then added more confidently, "Deal." They started with reading. Emily had brought ocean animal books, remembering his lighthouse picture. As they sat together looking at dolphins and whales, Luca said suddenly, "My mama liked the ocean." Emily's heart clenched. This was the first time he'd mentioned his mother. "Yeah?" What did she like about it? She said it was big, bigger than everything. He traced his finger over a whale picture. We went to the beach once, before she got sick. That sounds like a beautiful memory. Your mama sounds really smart. She was. Luca looked up at Emily, his eyes searching. Are you going to leave too? The question knocked the air from Emily's lungs. Of course he worried about this. Everyone he'd cared about had left. I'm not planning to, Emily said honestly. I really like spending time with you, but I think it's okay for you to worry. Lots of people you loved have left, and that's scary. My therapist said feelings are okay. Your therapist was right. All feelings are okay, even the scary ones. They sat with that truth for a moment before continuing to read, and Emily understood that her real job wasn't teaching academic subjects. It was helping Luca trust the world again. The weeks established a rhythm. Emily came 5 mornings a week for 3 hours. They worked through first-grade curriculum but focused more on rebuilding Luca's confidence in engaging with life. They did science experiments, volcanoes with baking soda and vinegar, growing crystals, watching food coloring spread through water. Luca loved the hands-on learning, his questions growing bolder each day. Why does the red go faster than the blue? He asked, watching colors diffuse. Great question, what do you think? Maybe the red is lighter. Let's test that theory. How could we figure out if you're right? This was Emily's teaching philosophy, helping Luca discover his own curiosity, reminding him his thoughts and ideas mattered. He'd been locked inside himself so long. She wanted to give him keys back to the world. Vincent often watched from the doorway, never interrupting but clearly monitoring progress. Emily could see his transformation too. Relaxed shoulders, easier smiles. Having Luca engage again had lifted a weight he'd carried alone too long, but shadows never fully disappeared. Tony remained constant, and Emily noticed additional security she hadn't seen before. Vincent explained that until certain business matters resolved, vigilance was necessary. How long will this last? Emily asked once. Until I can resolve certain complications, Vincent said vaguely. I'm working on it. Emily didn't press. She'd made her choice. She had to trust Vincent with parts she couldn't control. What she could control were those 3 daily hours with Luca, which became her life's highlight. Watching him unfold like a flower closed too long, seeing his personality emerge, curious, thoughtful, occasionally funny in ways that reminded her of Vincent. One morning in late December, Luca asked, "Can we go outside?" Emily checked with Vincent, who agreed immediately. The grounds are secure. Stay within sight of the house. Bundled in winter coats, they explored the estate's gardens. Frozen pond, bare trees, stone paths winding through dormant flower beds. It's so quiet, Luca observed, breath making small clouds. Different from inside, right? Inside is quiet because there's no sound. Outside is quiet because there's so much space for sound to go. He looked at Emily. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. You're very good at noticing things. Near the property's edge, by the tall fence, Luca stopped. Miss Emily, are the bad people still watching you? Emily's stomach tightened. She'd never mentioned surveillance around him, but he'd picked up on it anyway. Your dad's making sure everyone stays safe, she said carefully. Because of me. Because I liked you. And now you're in danger. No. Emily knelt to his level, hands on his shoulders. Listen, Luca. You are not responsible for adult problems. Your dad's work is complicated. That's not because of you. Me choosing to be your teacher is my choice, not because of you either. You're just a kid who deserves to laugh and learn and not worry about grown-up stuff. But I do worry. I know. That's okay to feel, but it's not your job to fix it. Luca's eyes filled with tears, the first real emotional release Emily had seen. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I don't want to lose someone else. Emily pulled him into a hug, feeling his small body shake. You're not going to lose me. I promise I'm being careful and your dad's being careful. We're working together to keep everyone safe. Promise? I promise I'll do everything I can. It wasn't a guarantee. Life didn't offer those. But it was truth, and Luca accepted it. He wiped his eyes, embarrassed, and Emily pretended not to notice. They walked back hand in hand, and Emily realized how invested she'd become. This wasn't just a job. Luca wasn't just a student, he'd become part of her heart. The crisis came 2 weeks before Christmas. Emily was home wrapping presents when her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Emily Harper? A man's voice, unfamiliar. We need to talk about your arrangement with Vincent Romano. Every alarm went off. Who is this? A concerned party. You've gotten yourself involved in a situation you don't understand. Mr. Romano's business dealings have consequences, and you're caught in the middle. I'm hanging up. Before you do, you should know we have photos of your grandmother at physical therapy. We know her schedule, her medications. It would be unfortunate if anything disrupted her care. Emily's blood ran cold. Are you threatening my grandmother? We're pointing out vulnerabilities. Mr. Romano understands these things. Tell him Marcus sends regards. Tell him we need an agreement about the Brooklyn properties, and his stubbornness creates unnecessary complications. The line went dead. Emily stood frozen, hands shaking. They'd threatened Nana. Actually threatened an elderly woman who'd done nothing except have a granddaughter who showed kindness to a child. She called Vincent immediately. Emily? He answered on the first ring. Someone called. Marcus. He threatened my grandmother. Something about Brooklyn properties. Damn it. Vincent's composure cracked completely. Are you home? Is your grandmother with you? Yes. Tony's 5 minutes away. Don't open the door for anyone else. I'm handling this now. Vincent, who are these people? Business competitors who think threatening civilians gives them leverage in a real estate dispute. His voice turned cold. They're wrong. I'll call back in 20 minutes. Keep your grandmother close. Those 20 minutes felt endless. Emily sat with Nana, trying to appear calm while her mind raced. What had she gotten them into? When Tony arrived, he checked the apartment, secured the locks, stationed himself by the door. His presence was reassuring and terrifying simultaneously. Vincent called back exactly on time. It's handled. What does that mean? Marcus made a miscalculation. He thought threatening you would make me back down. Instead, it gave me leverage with mutual business associates who don't appreciate these tactics. Marcus has been encouraged to focus elsewhere. And my grandmother? Completely safe. I've arranged private security at her therapy facility and your building. Marcus won't try anything. He knows the consequences now. This is insane, Vincent. I know. I'm sorry. He sounded devastated. This is what I feared when I first involved you. I thought I could protect you, keep these worlds separate, but I was naive. What happens now? Long pause. That depends on you. I can extract you completely. Provide security until matters resolve. Make clear you have no connection to us. You'd be safe, your grandmother safe, and you could return to normal life. And Luca would be devastated, but he'd survive. Children are resilient. Vincent's voice thickened. I won't trap you, Emily. I won't ask you to sacrifice your safety for my son, no matter how much he needs you. Can I think about it? Give you an answer tomorrow? Of course. Whatever you need. After hanging up, Emily explained everything to her grandmother. Nana listened carefully, then took Emily's hand. What does your heart tell you? That I don't want to abandon Luca, but I don't want to endanger you either. I'm 83 years old. I've lived a full life. That boy is 6. He has everything ahead, but only if someone helps him. If you can be that person, even with risks, maybe that's what you're meant to do. But if something happens to you because of my choice, then it happens. But it won't be because of your choice. It'll be because some men choose threats over honest business. You can't take responsibility for other people's bad decisions. Emily leaned against her grandmother's shoulder. I'm scared. Good. That means you're paying attention. But don't let fear decide. Let love decide. Next morning, Emily arrived to find Vincent waiting. I'm staying, she said before he could speak. But I have new conditions. I need to understand more about your world. Not illegal parts, but the realities I'm walking into. Monthly security check-ins. And if there's ever a direct threat that can't be managed, I can step back temporarily. Vincent nodded slowly. I agree to all of that. But understand, this incident with Marcus is resolved. But there will always be something. People wanting leverage. Competitors making poor choices. Complications from old business. It's my reality and Luca's. If you're part of our world, you're accepting ongoing uncertainty. I understand. But we all live with uncertainty. My grandmother could have a medical crisis tomorrow. I could get hit crossing the street. Life doesn't offer guarantees. The question isn't whether there's risk, it's whether what we're risking for is worth it. And is it? For you? Emily thought about Luca's laugh, the light returning to his eyes, how he'd started believing the world could be safe again. Yes, it is. Relief washed over Vincent's face. Thank you. That boy upstairs has lost enough. I'm not going to be another person who disappears. They didn't tell Luca about the threat. Lessons continued normally, security measures blending into routine background. As Christmas approached, they did holiday activities, salt dough ornaments, stories about different celebrations, attempted cookies, slightly burnt but edible. Luca's vocabulary expanded dramatically. He told stories, asked complex questions, even argued occasionally, healthy assertiveness that delighted everyone. On the last day before Christmas break, Luca gave Emily a wrapped gift. Excessive tape, wrinkled paper. Inside was a drawing of them at the diner. Careful details including her apron, his coloring book, checkered floor tiles. "I made this for you," he said shyly, "because you made me brave again." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "This is the most beautiful gift anyone's given me." "Really? Really, truly. Miss Emily? I heard Daddy talking to Tony. I know bad men tried to scare you. I know you could have left but stayed. So much for protecting him from adult problems. I wanted to say thank you," Luca continued, "for staying, for being brave too." She hugged him tight. "We're all being brave together. You and me and your dad and Maria and Tony. That's what families do. Are we a family?" The question caught her off guard. What they'd built, the trust, care, commitment, wasn't that family in its truest form? "Yeah," Emily said softly. "I think we are." Christmas Day, Emily and Nana joined the Romanos for dinner. The dining table that once felt cold now warmed with conversation and laughter. Luca showed Nana his coloring books, explained science experiments, even sang part of a song. Watching him confidently engage with new people was overwhelming. Later, while Nana and Maria compared recipes and Luca played with his new telescope, Vincent and Emily found themselves alone. "I never thought we'd have this," Vincent said quietly, watching Luca excitedly explain constellations. "A normal Christmas. Family gathered, my son talking, laughing, being a child. It's not exactly normal," Emily pointed out. "Security guards outside, complicated backstories, unconventional family definition. No, but it's ours. And it's real. It is real." "I've been working on transitioning my business dealings," Vincent said seriously, "making things more conventional. It'll take years, but I want Luca to inherit something he can be proud of. And I want to minimize risks for people I care about." "People you care about?" "You, your grandmother, Maria, Tony, everyone who's become part of our family." He smiled slightly. "Letting people in is terrifying, but worth it. Welcome to the human experience," Emily teased. "Messy, scary, and complicated, and worth it. For the first time in forever, I believe that." 6 months later, spring transformed the estate. Gardens Emily and Luca had walked through in winter now burst with tulips, daffodils, cherry blossoms. Luca's 7th birthday party was small, just family, a few carefully selected guests. No overwhelming crowds, just people who mattered, gathered in the garden for cake and games. Emily watched Luca run through grass with lightness she'd never seen before. Still quieter than most kids his age, still carrying awareness beyond his years, but healing, growing, becoming. Later, as the party wound down, Luca found Emily on a garden bench. "Can I show you something?" He led her to a corner where a small plaque had been installed near a newly planted cherry tree. The plaque read, "Catherine Romano Memorial Garden, where hope grows. Daddy planted this for Mama," Luca explained. "He said she'd like knowing something beautiful was growing here. He said she'd like knowing I was growing too. I bet she would. Miss Emily, do you think she'd like you?" "I'd like to think so. I think so too. I think she'd be happy I'm not alone anymore." Emily squeezed his hand. This child who'd taught her as much as she'd taught him. About resilience. About showing up. About how love, in whatever form, is always worth the risk. They stood in Catherine's garden, surrounded by life and growth and possibility, and Emily understood this imperfect, complicated, beautiful reality was exactly where she was meant to be, not because it was safe or simple, but because some connections transcend logic. Some bonds are worth fighting for. Sometimes the bravest thing is staying when leaving would be easier. Luca looked up at her, dark eyes filled with trust. "Are you happy you stayed?" "Every single day," Emily answered honestly. Behind them, Vincent emerged from the house, Maria beside him, both watching with quiet contentment. Bodyguards at their posts, security systems monitoring, complications still existing in the background. But here, in this moment, in this garden where hope grew and a once silent boy had learned to speak again, none of that mattered. What mattered was connection, family, love in all its messy, imperfect forms. Luca tugged Emily's hand. "Come on, I want to show you something else." And Emily followed. as she would for years to come, into whatever adventure this unconventional family would face next. Together, always together.